Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Whitney Burgess, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Strategy at MHP Team SI. And I've got a great team here with me. Specifically today, we're talking about Google Core Web Vital updates. So I've got all the smart people to help talk to us about what this is, what do we need to know, and what are we doing to mitigate risk. So I'll introduce my teammates. First, I have Steve Coplan, who's our Director of WordPress Development. And I have John Morgan, who's our Director of Analytics. You may have seen him on a previous video talking about our latest updates as that information came through last week. But we wanted to get back together because I was talking with Steve and John earlier about, what are we doing? How do we explain what all this complicated jargon is in letters? What is it? How do we know if our site's been tested for it? And what strategies and tactics are our teammates, especially on the development side when we're building sites, what kind of things are going into that process to mitigate risk as we're going forward. So we'll take a second and I'll stop talking. So John, talk to me about what are the Google Core Web Vital updates? What does this mean? What is all of this about?
Yep. So the Core Web Vitals update is kind of the latest in a long string of Google's efforts to be able to put a number to the experience that people are having when they click through from a search result and land on a page. Specifically, this has been leaning really heavily towards mobile over the past few years. So this is, again, the latest and greatest. So lately, they announced, as we talked about the other day, they announced that they are pushing back an algorithm update that relates to these metrics, these Core Web Vital metrics. So instead of rolling out in May, they're going to be beginning to roll out in June and end up being in full effect in August of this year. So that's kind of the nutshell version. I don't know if you want to take a deeper dive, Whitney.
Well, we can definitely get into it, but I know you mentioned the algorithm update, and I know one of the key pieces is that Google updates their algorithm all the time. So these are not this isn't a new thing, but this is one of those bigger pieces that they've actually announced and let us know in advance was coming. And then they decided to delay it a little bit. And that was one of the big pieces last week. But I think you also mentioned mobile first and really focusing in on site speed. And so, Steve, I know in the website build, we've been talking about mobile first and responsiveness in our design for a while. So were there any major changes that you were concerned about, or do you feel that from our development process that was kind of already built into it?
Yeah, well, first, these metrics aren't brand new. They just didn't pop up overnight. They've been around since development's been around to a certain degree on there. So none of this is too surprising. It's just that they've narrowed it down to 3 core vitals that really do affect the page load speed. And when we're starting a development project, and even when we're looking at the designs and getting ready to start architecting that, we take a lot of that into consideration. What approaches are we going to use? We also have testing tools built into our approach. We use GTmetrix, Google Page Speed, another tool called Lighthouse. All of these are industry standards, just to name a few. There's some other tools that go into it. But like, for instance, one of the low-hanging fruits is usually images, almost always images. And looking at how we architect that so that we're delivering the proper file size for different devices and different connection speeds.
I think that you're right on the money. I think especially in my experience, now I'm definitely not on the development team and I'm definitely not on the analytics team, but typically my role is in communicating with clients and kind of that go-between of gathering content and information to hand it over. And there's definitely, as we take pictures that are high resolution, those do take up a lot of file size. And so all of that adds into the site performance. Even with video, now everything is really pushing more towards video type content, but I think that there's lots of different strategies to having, if you want to embed the video on your site directly, or even like a playlist from YouTube, and kind of the benefits of that to help with site speed. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. There's a lot of benefits to not hosting your own videos on your website. It's just storage space, but mostly it's performance. in speed and how that affects it, because even the space that's being stored takes a certain amount of power away from, that storage takes some of your performance away as well. So looking at ways to offload that. CDNs, content delivery networks, are another way to help spread that load around the entire internet, so that if a user is located in a certain geographic region, they're getting their content from a server that's much closer than, say, 1,000 miles away, which also helps.
So I'm going to bring us back into, Steve, you earlier mentioned that the 3 metrics are, so I've added those to the screen so we can kind of talk through them a little bit. Google's put these into 3 different categories: largest contentful paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift. Really what this means is how fast it takes to load, what is kind of the experience with that interactivity, your user experience, and then the visual stability. This is kind of like when you're scrolling through things and you click on the right thing or the wrong thing, like it's about managing pop-ups, right? And if that information is preventing you from getting to the information you want, right? I think that's usually my hardest one, is cumulative layout shift.
Yeah, a good example of that would be if you're loading. I see it a lot on my mobile device, where if I'm loading in a site and a lot of times you start seeing your content jump around on the screen because other elements are still loading, and that's because you're waiting on third-party services. Usually it's got to do with ads and ad placement, but it can also be your videos or images loading in too. There are ways around to adjust that so that you don't have that and you can stay in that good region and not get into the yellow or red.
Gotcha. Well, because I mean, I agree. I think a lot of what Google is doing is it's really kind of following up on their promise of what's important to Google is that people have a good user experience. This is a lot of things that I know that John and I have talked about, and I'm sure Steve has as well when talking to clients, is really managing those micro moments that Google calls them, to making sure that you've got to be there, be quick, and be relevant. So it's about having a fast loading site where people can find the information that they're looking for, and that it's useful to help answer the question that they have been searching for online. So really thinking through how all those pieces kind of fit together to keep managing that. And so these are just new additional metrics, or Steve, to your point, not new, but metrics that they're allowing us to be able to measure against. So let me ask you this. How do we test these? How do we test to see where we score in this? How do we know if our site is at risk? Kind of what's the action from knowing this information that's being handled in-house? So John, I'll start with you from an analytics side and where you are. How are you and your team helping prepare clients and businesses with this information, and what do we do?
Yeah, we have a couple of different ways that we monitor our clients' performance with regard to these core web vitals. And like Steve says, page speed and core web vitals, these metrics have been around for a while, so it's not necessarily something new that we're covering. It's just that now we are really paying attention to it because Google says, hey, you need to pay attention to this, right? And they're also giving us these numbers to aim for, whereas before you're just trying to improve it. Generally speaking, now we have, okay, well, 2.5 seconds and so on and so forth. So we have some numbers to shoot for per Google's own rules. So we obviously want to use some of Google's own tools. So we're measuring with the same yardstick that they're using. So whether that's page speed insights, or also, you can look at Google Search Console. They have a core web vitals report within Google Search Console. So, a lot of times with our clients, we try to either claim or get added to the Search Console as soon as possible so that we can monitor other performance metrics. But core web vitals is in there, so that just further, to me, it just goes to show that Google really cares about this and that we need to be watching it. So that's another place we can keep an eye on things.
Gotcha. So, Steve, on your side from the WordPress development team, how is your team focusing in on, we've got these metrics, how do we make sure that we or measuring against it? What type of tactics and implementation are we doing in our process to make sure that our website builds are following in line? What's kind of happening on the development side?
Well, not a big change other than the focus, and it's now going to affect, later in the year, it'll be affecting your search engine results. But we have tools built into our WordPress build where when we're getting close to the end and getting ready in our pre-launch, we run these tests in-house on the sites because it's kind of like when you go to get a physical and the doctor wants to run a test to have a baseline. We want to have a baseline for where we launch your site so we know where these core vital statistics are, because websites are a living being. Once they go out into the wild, you're adding new content, so things are going to change from the day it launched, and these statistics are going to change over time. So we like to start with that baseline to make sure we've set it up for success at launch, and then we can adjust, because we can go back as a client's been adding more content and hey, we're slipping a little bit. Then we can go back and take another snapshot and compare to our baseline and see where things maybe have need a little bit more of attention, where we can go back in and clean things up, because websites are they're never a finished project.
That is absolutely true. We talk about it all the time. Like, your website is a 24-hour salesperson that is online, ready to take information, take inventory, and be available there. So I agree. And there's always new things to add on and new optimizations that come in on that side. So I absolutely agree with you on that. Steve mentioned kind of your organic search results. So John, are you expecting that at the end of June that we're just going to see organic search results that we've all been working on, that they just tank if you're not in with having strong metrics here? Or what are you expecting to happen there?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I don't expect there to be a really dramatic change in the lay of the land when it comes to search results. I think this is it's an iterative update to the algorithm. It's not something that they're going to judge really critically on. It's not going to be extremely heavily weighted in terms of how it's going to impact rankings. It's important. It's not something that should be ignored, but I think it is one of those things that with SEO, you can die a death by 1,000 cuts. And this is just one of those things that we have to monitor, and we add it to our checklist. And if you don't stay on top of it, then, all other things being equal, if your competitor has a better core web vitals performance than you do, then you're going to you're going to be second to them in search results for those keywords that are valuable to your bottom line. So that's where I think it's going to go. I think it's going to be important, but not the end all be all if you're not doing well. But vital is the word, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of what I'm hearing from both of you is that even though a lot of the language that's coming out in news articles, especially from Google, it's like, update, this is going away, update, these major changes are happening. I do feel better after this conversation of realizing some of this is new news, most of it's not. This is kind of in the direction that Google's been going for the last couple of years, which we as a team have already implemented a lot of those standard operating procedures to mitigate risk for this. So making sure that we are more, we've been talking about mobile first, talking about site speed, talking about testing for image sizes, all of that piece for a while now. So it makes me feel better talking to you guys, knowing that this was already top of mind for us. And so this is just metrics to attribute to versus something that means, oh no, our rankings are going away overnight. So I do definitely feel better about that. With that, guys, anything else to add at this point? No?
I don't think so.
Good. Well, I want you all to know, it's like one of the reasons that we wanted to get together is because we're definitely monitoring this closely, wanting to make sure that we are helping keep all of our clients and friends aware of these updates as they come in. We're continuing to monitor it. Be sure that you reach out to a team member if you have any questions. I know that John and Steve are happy to answer questions. I'm happy to help in connecting you with one of them if needed, so that you can talk to smart people and get smart answers. But with that, thanks everybody for the time today. And let us know in the comments if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you.